This is Heath Sanders, and you're listening to TNCRadio.live.
Hello and welcome to the train station. We are here to talk about our love of railroading. We've been involved with it our whole lives, and we love talking about it. We want to introduce you to it. My name is Bill Waldrop. I'm the host of the show, along with Jim Lueders. He is my co-host. We're both in the Houston, Texas area, and we are excited to have with us this morning a friend of ours by the name of Mike Harris, which we've known for many years. We've all been members of the Gulf Coast Chapter National Railway Historical Society in the past or current. And Mike, welcome to the show, sir. Thanks for joining us.
Well, I'm happy to be here. I'm in Moody, Texas, and I'm happily retired from my work, and I get to spend a lot more time with my favorite hobby is railroading.
Right. Absolutely. Now, where exactly is Moody, Texas?
We're about halfway between Temple and Waco, Texas. We're in the heart of Texas, or Central Texas, as some people refer to it.
There you go. That sounds good. All right, and now you lived here in Houston for us with us for a while over on the east side of town. You lived near I guess it was a main line you were near. What main lines are you near there in Moody? What are they, and how close are they to you?
Well, I live. Moody is a town of 1,300 people, so the trains don't even slow down here. There is a siding here. We are on the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Fort Worth subdivision.
Right.
Roughly 22 miles north of Temple. And Temple is where the Fort Worth subdivision and the Lampasas subdivision split off from the Galveston subdivision.
Yeah.
And that's the line that comes up from Galveston through Houston and up to Temple.
Okay.
So we get a lot of traffic here on the BNSF coming from Chicago and points northeast, and also from California and points northwest, because those two major feeders funnel into Temple and down towards the Gulf Coast and Houston and New Orleans.
What's your primary traffic on that line? I guess coal trains, intermodal? What's your primary?
I would say we get mostly. It's about an even split between coal trains, automobile trains, and intermodal trains.
Right.
And then the other, and then the fourth is the manifest trains, just general merchandise trains. So we have about an equal number of both of each. And I don't actually have an actual count, but there's roughly 20 to 25 trains a day through here.
Well, that's
how about Amtrak, Mike? Does Amtrak come through Temple?
Golly, you're right. Amtrak does come through here, and that's one of the reasons we selected this area. Is we have daily Amtrak service from San Antonio to Chicago and back. And that
lucky you.
Also, yes,
we you'd think we'd have that here in Houston, but we don't. We have one passenger train a day. One day it's one direction, the next day it's the other direction. So, and that's the Sunset Limited between New Orleans and Los Angeles. So, you have better Amtrak service than we do, and we're a much bigger city. So, that's a good spot to live. I would
That's
say.
right. That's right. And on that note, on the days that the Sunset Limited runs from Los Angeles to San Antonio, there are cars that are cut off and put on the Texas Eagle that run on through to Chicago. So yes, you can go from go between LA and Chicago via San Antonio, riding the same car without a car change.
I didn't know that. I didn't know they interchanged cars to that other train. Wow.
They do.
That's cool. That's cool. Now, you mentioned that, the auto racks on their trains up there. Where I live down here in the Houston area, I'm on, I think officially it's called the Glidden sub, but we call it the Sunset Main. It is the Southern Transcon that runs between Los Angeles and New Orleans. And it is busy, but you know what? I was talking to Jim off the air a little while ago that, what I've noticed over the last few months. Obviously, we know there's no automobiles in the dealerships. They can't get them because of computer chips and other problems like that. I haven't seen an auto rack on a freight train in months. They're just not moving anything, automobile wise through the Houston area. And we're a major port for the automobiles. Of course, that'll pick up as they're able to do that. But right now it's pretty quiet. And I have 3 railroads that run on this track. This is a Union Pacific primary line, but also BNSF has trackage rights, and also KCS, Kansas City Southern, which runs down, branches often goes to Laredo, Jim. Is that right? The KCS here?
Well, they'll use UP tracks to Rosenberg, and then they go down. The KCS goes down their own railroad towards Kendleton and Victoria, and down towards Corpus Christi. But and then they also use the the UP tracks again from south, from Angleton to Bloomington to Corpus Christi. Right.
But they run traffic to Laredo, don't they?
Oh, yes. Yeah,
okay.
They're running automobiles. KCS is running automobiles through Houston all the time because all those Mexican Fords and other, I don't know who else makes cars down there, whether it's BMW or Nissan, but
there's not many auto racks coming through now, though. I mean, that's on a normal day it would be. And recently, guys, I've noticed here on the main when I see the trains go by, a lot of them I see more KCS than I do BNSF. Through here.
Yeah.
They're very busy down through here because, again, they're going to Corpus, they're going to Laredo through here. So they get a lot of trains through here. And, of course, a lot of Union Pacific headed towards Los Angeles.
Right. But the KCS has massive they take the auto parts in boxcars to Mexico, and then they bring back the automobiles. And I think the UP, now Mike might know this better than I do, but the UP brings automobiles back up from Mexico through the Laredo Gateway, going north towards San Antonio and Fort Worth. They run a couple of automobile trains out of Laredo every day. I do know that.
Yeah,
because I've been down there on my high-wide job, and they run. UP runs a lot of automobile traffic, both north and south.
Yeah,
over the border.
Gotcha. Hey, Mike, we know you and your bride. Donna like to travel a lot by passenger trains. Since you're retired, you do that a lot. And recently you rode a brand new line. Now, a lot of people may have heard of the Rocky Mountaineer up in Canada. Now, correct me on the path of that. What is that? That's Vancouver up to, is it Calgary?
They run the 2 or 3 routes up there, but yeah, their primary one is over, out of Vancouver through the Rogers Pass to Banff, Alberta, which is a well-known resort spot up there.
Yeah,
and I think they connect to Calgary. I don't have their route guide right in front of me, but yes, they're primarily a Canadian corporation, and they run strictly tourist trains on the Via Rail Canada routes in Canada, which are either Canadian Pacific or Canadian National railroads. So Via Rail Canada is like Amtrak in the United States. They own very little of their own railroad track, but they run on their tenants on the other common carrier railroads in this country. So Via Rail Canada does the same thing, but right now there's primarily 2 common carrier railroads in Canada, which are Canadian Pacific and Canadian National. So Rocky Mountaineer Rail Tours operates tourist trains on those routes. Their business is set up to run during the daylight only. They operate only tourist cars, and they stop at night. They have several overnight itineraries, and they stop at night and put you up in a hotel. And they're usually, on their Canadian products, they offer 3 class levels. And so, and they're each proportionally priced. And let's see, they're silver leaf, gold leaf, and maple leaf, or something like that. Something similar to that. But anyway, this Rocky Mountaineer.com is their website, and anyone's free to look that up and check into those details. But
now, how long has that been running? That's been running for decades up there, right?
That's correct. As far as I know, they've been running probably close to 30 years, I would guess. That's just off the top of my head. But to get back to our recent experience, they this year have started an operation operating between Denver, Colorado, and Moab, Utah.
Okay.
And that is an overnight itinerary in which the package includes a hotel night in Denver before the trip, bus connections to the train, which it does not leave from the Union Station. It leaves from a yard on the east side of town.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought it was Union Station.
For some reason they don't. All the parties couldn't agree, so they operate out of the 38th Street yard and Union Pacific Yard on the east side of town, and they use some industrial trackage to get back to the BNSF line going west, which is the ex-Denver Rio Grande line to Salt Lake City.
Do they have a little station there for everybody, or is it just a little siding track?
It's just a track next to the road in a freight yard.
Wow, well, it's not fancy, but maybe someday they'll get something going there.
No, it's not fancy, but it's plenty adequate, safe, and they have the routine down pretty pat. So once you arrive there, you're dropped off pretty close to the car that you're going to board for the day. Yeah. They actually assign you seats in it.
Oh, that's good.
And like I said, these are tourist cars, so they have they're pretty much like airline seating, only much more spacious. So you have a forward-facing seat and you have a tray table on the back of the seat in front of you that you use for your dining or whatever pleasure you need a tabletop for.
Right.
Otherwise,
Mike, I'm asking you to hold up for just a second. We need to end this segment real quick and take a quick break. We'll come right back and continue this conversation. You are tuned to TNCRadio.live, and this is this train station. I'm Bill Waldrop with my co-host Jim Lueders, and our guest today is Mike Harris. More information in just a few moments. We'll be right back.
For the latest in Houston traffic, weather, news, and information, don't miss the Evening Surge weekdays from 4 to 6 p.m. on TNCRadio.live.
This is TNCRadio.live, and welcome back to the train station. Hey, if you've got some ideas for some topics of conversation, please reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. Let us know that you're listening, where you are. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, have a question for something that we could talk about, drop us a line, drop us an email. Our email address is HoustonRailFans, that's plural, HoustonRailFans@gmail.com. So we'd love to hear from you. We are speaking with Mike Harris, our buddy here, who is up in Central Texas, who recently rode the new Rocky Mountaineer line between Denver, Colorado, and Moab, Utah. Now, Mike, on the last segment, you talk about, they put you up overnight in Denver, they put you on the bus, they take you to the train right there, basically in a freight yard on the east side of Denver. So continue on from there. So you get on there. Tell us about the inside of the train. Is it nicely decorated, the different levels of service, and what you get with each service? And, tell us about your journey.
It's basically sort of it's not what you would call a rail fan experience, but people who are interested in riding trains and seeing scenery and being pampered, it's definitely a plus for that. So as I was detailing in the last segment, the cars are basically modified coach cars with airline type seating, only much more spacious. 2x2 seating. You have a tray table on the seat back of the seat in front of you for your tabletop needs. But the cars have high windows that curve up somewhat over the top. And so you have a very wide viewing angle to see the scenery and see the world go by from your seat.
Now, are these low-level or high-level cars?
These are all low-level cars.
Okay. Which for the non-rail fan, that means it's just a lower level. Like it doesn't have the high level, like dome type. Or are there any dome cars on this train at all, or is it all low level, single level cars?
These are all single level cars, and I'm not sure exactly why, but they seem to be run mostly their high level, their multi-level cars up in Canada.
Okay.
I think we touched on that briefly in the last segment. But anyway, so once you board your assigned seat, and your seats are assigned at the time you book the trip, when they provide you your final booking documents. And so we were served 2 meals on the first day. The first day is from Denver through up the eastern slopes of the Rockies, through the Moffett Tunnel, which is the Continental Divide, and then down into Glenwood Springs. So there's some deep canyon views of the rivers approaching the either side of the Continental Divide, and just some spectacular canyon views, and there's just a lot of beautiful scenery. And at the time of year we went, the fall colors were just about to start turning. Some of the aspen were just falling into their yellow stage when they turn yellow, bright yellow, and then the more of an orange hue, and then the leaves fall off, and it's wintertime.
Right. Now you said they fed you on the train. So now these are not prepackaged meals. These are cooked on the train. Is that correct?
They are somewhat prepared. They're not prepackaged as in airline travel, but they're pretty much microwavable type meals served on china with the real silverware.
Now, do you have dining cars, or do you eat at your seat?
We eat at our seat.
Okay.
There's not, to my knowledge, there's not a dining car. We were not free to roam the train as you are on some tourist trains, but so we were pretty much restricted to our car for the duration of the trip. And so the first day we were served breakfast and then a lunch. The breakfast was basically some nicely dressed scrambled eggs along with a meat of your choice and beverages.
Yeah.
And then after breakfast is done, you're still enjoying the scenery, and they have a beverage service for children and adults. This trip was mostly 99% adults. There were a few children, very few children, but they're more than welcome.
Yeah.
Alcoholic and non-alcoholic beverages for everyone, and pretty much all you wanted.
Yeah.
Lunch was a pork tenderloin, or I think there was another choice I've forgotten. And again, it was a very nice meal, very tasty, and nicely dressed, and competently served by the serving staff.
Yeah.
And so we got to Glenwood Springs about 5 p.m. The remarkable segment of our particular trip is this line had recently been closed because of rock slides that closed. This railroad shares the canyon with of the Colorado River with Interstate Highway 70, and both the railroad and the interstate were closed for several days because of these rock slides.
Right.
And they were due to some recent storms, some late summer storms in an area where there had been a forest fire the year before.
Okay.
So that's just that little bit of forest fire, the loss of that little bit of vegetation to hold the rocks to the side of the mountains caused all that stuff to become unstable and fell down. And so the line was closed for several days along with the freeway. And even the staff on our train, they ran 10 training trips before they ever hauled the first passenger.
Wow.
And they got stranded in Glenwood Springs for several days on account of these rock slides.
Yeah.
So their training routine was interrupted on account of this.
Now, do they run more than one? Do they have, how many train sets do they have, and how many are they running at one time? They
operate one train set, and they make 2 round trips. It's a 3-day itinerary out of Denver. We have Denver to Glenwood Springs, spend the night in a hotel in Glenwood Springs, and our hotel was right next to the train station. But Glenwood Springs is not that big, but I think they used 2 or 3 or maybe 4 different properties for the people on the train, which I think was in the neighborhood of 200 people.
Wow, pretty good crowd. That's impressive.
Yep. And then the second day is Glenwood Springs to Moab, and you don't actually go into Moab. They stop at a siding about 7 miles from Moab.
Okay.
So the train arrives there. The inbound passengers debark onto 5 buses, and they do a quick cleaning and restocking on the train. And the return passengers board that same evening, and the train goes back to Glenwood Springs.
Oh.
And then the third day of their itinerary goes back to Denver. So you can book this itinerary either direction. I don't know that, and I suppose if you wanted to, you could book it both ways if you didn't want to stay in Moab. But there's a lot of spectacular stuff to see around Moab. I'd heard of it all my life, but it was one of those places we never made it to.
I hear it's beautiful out there.
It is. Well, it's high desert scenery and a lot of spectacular, just natural rock formations and it's and except for these national parks, that part of Utah is pretty much desolate.
Okay. We only got a couple minutes left in this segment, Mike, then we'll take a break. But real quick, once you get to Moab, are you just put in a hotel and then you come back the next day? Or is there some kind of a tour of a park or something included once you get to Moab?
Besides the train part of the trip, they offer several optional off-train experiences. The one we selected was 2 nights in Moab with a rental car.
Oh.
So we were able to travel around to the local areas on our own,
right,
and end up in Salt Lake City for the last night of the trip. And you turn in the rent car, and then you book your own transportation from there back to your home. So our itinerary was, I think, a 7-day itinerary where we spent the night in Denver. This trip included a night in Denver, a night in Glenwood Springs, 2 nights in Moab, and 1 night in Salt Lake City.
Okay.
So it was 6 days and 5 nights. And then we opted to extend our trip after that.
But you could just go to Moab and back the next day if you wanted to.
I would say it's possible. You wouldn't have much time in Moab because the train is probably there not over about 4 hours, so you don't really have much time to see anything. Right. I think you pretty much can go, but you could go out on one package and return on 3 days later either 3 or 4 days later on the return trip.
Okay, so that's great.
So anyway, like I was saying, they operate 2 round trips a week.
Okay,
so they're 2 3-day trips a week, and then they have an extra day in Denver between trips.
Gotcha. Hey, let's take a quick break real quick. You are in the train station here on tncradio.live. I'm Bill Waldrop along with Jim Lueders, and our guest today is Mike Harris talking about his trip by a private passenger train out towards Moab, Utah. We'll continue this very fascinating conversation in more detail in just a moment. Again, this is tncradio.live. Stay tuned.
For the latest in Houston traffic, weather, news, and information, don't miss the Evening Surge, weekdays from 4 to 6 p.m. on tncradio.live.
Welcome back to tncradio.live and the train station. I'm Bill Waldrop along with Jim Lueders, and our guest today is our friend Mike Harris. We're talking about his trip out of Denver over to Moab, Utah on the new Rocky Mountaineer. Now, Mike, we talked earlier in the last segment about these are low-level cars, not high-level cars, and you said the reason is a small bridge or a small tunnel towards Moab that couldn't accommodate the larger cars. Kind of explain what you're talking about.
Well, in the passenger train world, the Amtrak operates normal level cars and high level cars, which are basically double decker cars.
Right.
And the Rocky Mountaineer operates in Canada with some double decker cars, just because the elevated riding position gives you a better view of the surrounding area.
Right.
But they only brought low level cars for this particular product because of their eventual intention to operate into the end of track at a place called Potash, Utah. And that is a little bit closer to the town of Moab, which is the end point of their itineraries for now out of Denver.
Right.
And but the last 5 miles of that line operates through a tunnel that was not built for high-level cars like automobile racks, double stack cars, or high-level passenger cars. Okay. The tunnel was built, and I don't know exactly when, but it was built to serve a potash mining operation in Utah. And so they never expected to haul anything bigger than a hopper car through it.
Right.
And that was the sole purpose of this line's existence. So it was never designed to operate passenger trains. So anyway, that is the reason they have low-level cars, as far as I know. And as I said, they back to the trip opportunities themselves. They're offer several options once you arrive in Moab. You can either stay there in hotels for the duration of the itinerary. We opted for an itinerary that included a rental car and 3 more days in our package. But there are other optional tours that you could take, bus tours to different places, operating out of Moab, guided tours. So there were at least 3 to 4 different options of things to do. And there were even options to travel on either to Salt Lake City or down through the other parks in Utah, down to Arizona, to like Phoenix or Tucson maybe. So you can see a lot more. There's 2 other big national parks in southern Utah that you could include in this itinerary, but it lengthened the itinerary. Yeah. But anyway, the trip we took was, I think I said it was a 7-day itinerary, so 6 days and 7 nights. 7 days and 6 nights. Yeah. And then we opted to extend our tour we had to turn in the rental car with our package and then just rent another car. And we drove down to Ely, Nevada, and rode the Nevada Northern train.
Yeah, that's a nice train. I've ridden that. That's nice. And
that's another mining town that existed for no other reason than more potash mines there.
Right.
And they still mine there, but it's low volume now, and they just truck the stuff in and out.
Let me ask you real quick. You said that Via Rail runs the Rocky Mountaineer in Canada. It's like Amtrak here in the U.S. Is this train over to Moab now? Is it an Amtrak train or is a private runner? Who's actually operating this?
It's actually operated by Via Rail. By the Rocky Mountaineer Rail Tours.
Okay.
And apparently they have a contract with Union Pacific, and I'm not sure what kind of arrangement they have with Amtrak. As you know, we've all been involved with our private cars, and we've been told that any passenger train, private or otherwise, that operates in the United States operates as an Amtrak train.
Right.
And I understand that's partly for the regulatory and safety insurance coverages on the tenant railroads.
Okay.
I've not heard precisely what the details of the contract these folks have to operate. So I wish I knew more about it, but
we can talk about that on another show when you find out. So
I have heard that they have a separate contract with Union Pacific. And it is strange how they did this, Mike, because normally you have to go through Amtrak, but they did not go through Amtrak. There are not Amtrak crews on that train. There's a subsidiary company that handles the staff, the engineer, and the conductor.
So what kind of engines were pulling? Were they Union Pacific freight engines?
Yes, they were Union Pacific freight engines that they leased to them along with, in this contract, UP gave them the power.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a high dollar contract because, as we know, UP will collect your money.
Yes, they will. Now, real quick, Mike, did they have a power car to provide HEP to the whole train, or did each car have its own generator? Because I know those freight engines don't have HEP power. How'd they power it?
Yes, they operate with a 10-car train set, and one of them is a power car, and I think one is a crew car, and the rest of them are tourist cars.
Right.
They brought this train down from Canada as a special train, and ran it in test mode for a few days, for 10 trips to familiarize the crews, both on board and the train crews with the operation and the details and the places where they may suffer slowdowns.
Right.
And anyway, so yes, the train, the Rocky Mountaineer train itself is self-contained. As you were saying, they have 2 Union Pacific locomotives leased, and they have removed the Union Pacific markings and put Rocky Mountaineer decals on 2 locomotives.
Nice.
And so the train runs with the 2 locomotives and head into the siding near Moab. The siding will only accommodate the 10 cars, so they have to pull the engines out on the main track, cut the cars off to run around it, and then couple back together into the train. And the train consist operates backwards from Moab to Glenwood Springs to Denver.
So there's no place to turn the train.
So there's no place to turn the train. That's correct.
Okay. All right. Well, Jim, we've only got a couple more minutes on this segment. Do you have anything else for Mike to talk about this?
No, I think that's a pretty good review of the train. Well, I guess one last question, Mike. What is the fare for this ride?
Our fare was around $6,000 for they only offer 2 classes on this, and for the itinerary we chose with a rental car, et cetera, was around $6,000
for 2 people.
So
for 2 people, yeah.
And,
okay. Well, that's interesting.
Would you do it again though?
I would.
Give everybody the website on this USA Colorado tour.
It's a RockyMountaineer.com.
And that covers Canada and the U.S. train. It covers both of them.
That's right. It's all booked from their reservation center in Canada.
Okay. All right.
That
sounds good.
Well, that sounds like an interesting trip. Of course, you could take this same trip on the daily California Zephyr out of Denver, like the old Rio Grande Zephyr. It's the same territory.
Yeah.
Through the Moffat Tunnel. And
not quite the same level of service, but you can see the same thing.
Yes.
Right.
All right.
Well, let's wrap up this segment with this.
Yeah.
Mike, stick around with us just a minute more. We got one more segment to go, and we want to talk about another thing that I know you love and I love riding on, and those are called motor cars. More on that in just a moment. You are in the train station with Jim Lueders, Bill Waldrop, and our guest, Mike Harris. This is TNCRadio.live. We'll be right back.
You're listening to TNCRadio.live. Remember to tune into the Truckers Network radio show with Shelley Johnson, weekdays at 3 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Eastern.
Thanks for joining us in the train station. This is TNCRadio.live. I'm Bill Waldrop with co-host Jim Lueders, and we have a guest today, our friend Mike Harris. Been a very interesting hour of his travels on the Rocky Mountaineer. But Mike, there's something else we know about you and we'd like for you to talk about, and that is your love of motor cars. If you could kind of explain to our audience what a motor car is, and what they're used for, and the name of the organization you belong to, and kind of tell us about the motor car biz.
I had seen these motor cars before as a kid. These are track maintenance vehicles used by track maintenance crews, and they're usually small enough to be manhandled on or off the track because they would have to run out and dodge trains, but to do necessary maintenance on the track. So anyway, I was always curious about these things. I found one for sale up in Oklahoma from an ad in Trains Magazine, so I bought one. Yeah. I have to backtrack here. My first ride on a motor car was when I was living in Louisiana in the New Orleans area. And for cheap entertainment, I'd hang around East Bridge Junction to watch the trains go by and got to know the bridge patrolman there. So my very first motor car ride was with the bridge patrolman whose job was to patrol the Huey Long Bridge across the Mississippi River in New Orleans.
Nice.
And they would do this. They would do this every 2 hours. And in those days, I'm talking about the mid 70s. Besides just looking at the track, his job was also to operate the foghorn when it was foggy, and to operate the navigation lights between dusk and dawn.
Wow.
And so that was my first experience with a motor car. So when I found the opportunity to buy one, I just did. And it took me about 5 years to get it operable. And then I went to find a place to try to run it. And met up with some gentlemen in Galveston at the Galveston Train Museum. And sure enough, there was a guy there that maintained the motor cars they had in their collection, and even operated them on some track that he managed to ride on just because he knew people.
Right.
So beginning in 1989, I had this Rock Island motor car that I got to running. It was sold brand new by Fairmont Railway Motors to the Rock Island Railroad in 1962.
Yeah.
Well, they went bankrupt in 1978, and I bought this car in 1984.
Yeah.
So that's how I got into the hobby. Years passed by. There were several independent groups of people like us who knew people who had cars and knew people to ride them, or had connections to ride them on the railroad tracks in different places. From that, a national organization was sprung called the North American Railway Car Operators Association, called NARCOA. And basically, they've turned into our national clearinghouse for safety, training, compliance, testing, and insurance.
Right.
And our insurance basically is a policy that we take out for each sanctioned ride to hold the railroad harmless, hold the track owner harmless, be it a railroad or a private company, whomever, from any incident that might happen during our operation. It doesn't protect any of the riders, but it does protect the property owner from a lawsuit, and how we get to ride on some of the publicly owned or publicly traded companies.
Now, I do want to mention here, Mike, it's important to note to our listeners that are not familiar with this, you can't just get one of these motor cars and just go jump on a main line somewhere. For goodness sakes, don't do that, because they're operating high-speed freight trains through there. This is something that, they get permission for. It's all, everybody knows what's going on. And it's usually, smaller railroads, branch lines, logging railroads, stuff like that, not necessarily main line. I just want to make sure that everybody was clear. They just don't go out and jump on a Union Pacific main line somewhere.
Well, that's right. And as I said, we belong to a national organization which administers a safety, testing, and insurance program. And then we also belong to local organizations who actually liaison with different railroad owners for permission to ride. And so our local organization in Texas is called Railroad Partners, Inc., and I'll back up to reference to NARCOA. NARCOA.org is their website, at which you can find all kinds of detailed information about the organization and what we do and why we do it and where we have runs. And then our Railroad Partners, Inc., which is railroadpartners.com, also publishes local rides and other historic things. We are a 501c3 nonprofit corporation for the preservation and education of railroad history.
Right.
With that, under those umbrellas, we get to take our cars out, and for the majority of our rides are keeping the track clear enough just to be able to ride the cars. But then eventually, we also include at least twice a year a recreational ride from one end of the track to the other. And we'll be on one this Saturday between Llano and Kingsland, Texas.
Okay.
Now, I've been out on that line many times doing maintenance, brush cutting, brush clearing, digging out road crossings.
I have this mental image of you going down the tracks in your motor car with a giant weed eater, just running it along the weeds as you're going along the tracks. I guess it's a little more complicated than that, though.
So that's interesting. Now, does your group take friends and acquaintances, or is it possible for other people to contact your group?
How does a listener go for a ride on a motor car?
Contact either one of those organizations, and on our local organization, there's a contact there for our event coordinator, and he will know what cars are going and which ones have extra seats, and he can put you in direct contact with car operator owner. Yeah. If you actually want to ride. We have a track restriction out there right now where I cannot take my big car, my 5-person car, so we will be out there just in the 2-person car this time. We had about 500 feet of track that was undercut by the floods on the Llano River year before last. Yeah. And so I don't feel comfortable taking my large car plus passengers on it.
Right.
Is that a weight restriction? Is that a weight restriction?
No, it's just unstable track. So
that's a good reason.
So we, yeah. So
hey, we only got a couple more minutes, guys, here. We've got to finish it up. I'm sorry to cut you off there, Mike. Real quick, out of curiosity, I know you haul this on a trailer behind your pickup truck. What is the furthest you have traveled with a motor car to go ride some track somewhere?
The furthest I have been is probably northern Mississippi.
Wow. Okay.
Wow.
So we rode the Mississippi Delta Railroad, and we rode about 90 miles of railroad on 2 days out there. Oh, so that was a nice long trip. Another trip I've taken is up in Oklahoma. Another 2-day ride where we covered probably 70 miles of railroad. Yeah. And we ride out and back each day. So these are out and back trips, daily trips. We just we'll ride different segments on different days, or sometimes we'll re-ride the same segment on subsequent days. But 200-mile trip over a weekend is not unusual.
Wow. And I've had the opportunity to ride with you and with our other friend Don Kendall and all that. It's a lot of fun, but it'll wear you out. It's not nice smooth suspension like the Rocky Mountaineer. These are little putt cars on the track. So, Mike, it's been fascinating speaking with you. We appreciate it. We'd love to have you back on another segment and talk more about trains if you come back and see us sometime.
I'm available.
That would be awesome. And I always like to talk to Donna on how she puts up with you and all this stuff. I know she loves to travel by train too, but I'd like to get her perspective on this as well. Jim, any final words here before we depart for the day?
Yeah, and thank you, Mike. That was very interesting on your travels. Bill, let's kind of tell everybody real quickly about some upcoming guests in the next few weeks that we have possibly going to talk about.
Yeah, we're still trying to set up some. I have set up one with a familiar name to a lot of rail fans, Mr. Bob Krieger, who used to be on the Union Pacific steam crew, now retired from Union Pacific, about the Union Pacific Historical Society, and he runs the office out of Cheyenne, Wyoming. So he'll be joining us pretty soon. We'll be talking about that and their upcoming convention that a number of us are going to go to in Cheyenne, Wyoming. So that's going to be great. That wraps up the show for this week. Thank you so much again, Mike and Jim. Thanks for being here, of course. This is TNCRadio.live. You are in the train station. I am Bill Waldrop. Reach out to us if you have any questions or comments. Our email is HoustonRailFans@gmail.com. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.